Toast Kaizen was focused on direct observation and Kaizen, small changes for the better. People are brilliant, and just reminding yourself at every point that if you take time to value people, this goes back to that same principle again, that people are the most valuable resource. Don't squander it. Make sure that you're developing those people.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Bruce Hamilton. And if you've ever sat through a lean training, there's a good chance that you have made toast with Bruce Hamilton. He's known around the world as the Toast Kaizen guy. Bruce has a gift for making complex ideas simple and unforgettable. His legendary video has introduced tens of thousands of people to the principles of lean and continuous improvement. But Bruce is more than just a viral training icon. He's a teacher, a storyteller, and a lifelong advocate for creating cultures where people thrive and processes flow. Today on KPI Fireside, we'll dive into the story behind Toast Kaizen, the lessons Bruce has learned from decades of lean leadership, and what continuous improvement means in the age of AI and rapid change. So grab a cup of coffee and maybe some toast and join me for a conversation with the one and only Bruce Hamilton. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be with you today, Keith.
It looks like you're enjoying some lovely outdoor weather, or you have a really amazing green screen, because I see leaves moving.
This is my backyard. This is away from the dogs. Okay, so hopefully this will work for us today. Beautiful day here in the Northeast.
This is a dog-friendly podcast. Sometimes my dog will make a cameo on here, but he's not with me today.
All right.
So, Bruce, one of the things that we like to start with on our podcast is a little segment that we call the spark. And the idea behind this is most of the people I meet in continuous improvement have like this moment that they might remember where like a light switch flipped on, or like they realize like there's something in this discipline for me, and I want to, put my energy into this. I'm curious if you remember when that moment was in your story.
There were a lot of moments, Keith. I didn't begin my career in manufacturing. I started out in marketing. Without going into all the details, I ended up in manufacturing, kind of got dropped into a plant that I had not worked in. And on my first day in the plant, a supplier was visiting the plant, and she walked by my office, and I introduced myself, and she says, "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Hamilton. If you can explain to me why it takes you 16 weeks to deliver a pressure switch the size of your fist to go on a compressor the size of a house." And at that moment, I knew we're in trouble. Customer is not happy. So that was kind of that's a moment stuck with me. So that was the start of my research. Why is it taking us so long to make a small product and get it to the customer?
And were you were in marketing at the time?
No, I'd moved from marketing. Very quickly, I moved from marketing into IT because I started, this was early in the days of IT, and I was using it in marketing. And then, the company was using it for manufacturing, and this opportunity came up. They said, "Well, you seem to know how the computer system works. Maybe you can make MRP work." And I didn't make it work, honestly. I learned a lot about it. I learned that people weren't using it, and there must be a better way. So that's another part of the story. So just picture me on that day, just starting out, recognizing that whatever work I'd been doing with IT was not exactly helpful. And now the customer is confirming that you should be doing a lot better. Yeah. So that's how I landed never intended to be in manufacturing. I love it. Happy to say I'm a production grunt, but I love the other parts of business too.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm curious to hear just a little bit about your story and how maybe through the evolution of how your perspective might have changed from that to, from production to leadership? Any other career transitions or company transitions that stand out as moments of inflection?
Well, it's interesting, if you take a look at the roles in a business, Keith. When I was in marketing, it was kind of the persona was creative guy, okay, which I like, and communicator, and a salesperson. Although I'm not really a good salesperson, but I provided a lot of effort to that end for salespeople. And then when I moved into IT, I became a brainy guy. So at that time, at least, there was a presumption or sort of an idea that if you're working in IT, you must be very smart. So I didn't get any smarter, but people thought I was smarter. And then when I moved into production, my IQ suddenly dropped 100 points. And these were people who knew me. But all of a sudden, I would be saying same thing I was saying, I'm still Bruce, and I'm offering these observations. And because of the position that I was in, and I was in management, it was even worse for the folks who were on the floor. You know, they were bad children. So it was a real eye opener for me moving through the organization. And don't misunderstand me. This was a wonderful company. I loved working for this company. This was every company. This is how companies operated. They were isolated. My first two jobs were not even in the same building. And so I had very little knowledge of what was going on. Probably better that I didn't because, all of the traditions that were happening on the shop floor, they weren't good for us either. Sort of autocratic behavior and, um, all of the whole business of huge lot production. People who are accustomed to it didn't see a problem with it. But for me, kind of virgin eyes, it said, this doesn't make any sense. You're building a whole lot of stuff that nobody wants. And then, when I began to learn about TPS, it's pretty early along. So today there's probably 365 million books on TPS. But at that time, Keith, there wasn't a lot. There was a couple books by some American authors. Robert Hall, Zero Inventories was an early text. But these were like reporters. And there was just one little line in Robert Hall's book that pointed to Shigeo Shingo in Seven Waste. And I said, oh, I got to get that. And there was a book. It was published by the Japanese Management Association, a very bad translation. I learned later was a translation by his son, Ritsuo Shingo. And so thank you to Ritsuo. He was the one who persuaded his dad to write and do something outside of Japan, for which Shingo had a black eye for a long time. You know, like the
Really?
folks, Toyota folks didn't like that he did that. They felt like he was giving away trade secrets. That's changed a lot. I think today he's definitely more highly regarded as one of the persons who was a contributor. And it's all started from that book, and certainly other books. I see a library in the back and I love books. I tell people you can't, you can't learn this stuff from a book, but I have probably got more books than anybody else I know on this topic. And so there's Shingo's books were really important, but so weren't a whole lot of other books. People who had suffered previously had a little bit more background before me. That was very helpful. Not that I did my own suffering too. It was a struggle. It was not easy trying to change that environment for sure.
One thing that I think is really interesting about this discipline of continuous improvement is the historical journey that it's been on. Because, when you read these books, and I do want to ask you for a book list because I love to get recommendations of books from time to time. I hear about some new ones. So look forward to doing that. But I'm curious, as you think about this evolution of this continuous improvement discipline, you've mentioned a couple of things like TPS, the Toyota production system. In the time that you've been involved with it, how would you describe the evolution of this discipline of continuous improvement? Are there some milestones that you feel like mark the path a little bit?
Well, yeah, there's milestones, good and bad. I think I forget who was the philosopher who said every great cause eventually turns into a business and then becomes a racket. I forget who he was, but there's a little bit of that going on. There's just, it's become a business and maybe sometimes heading towards a racket. That's worrisome to me.
Yeah.
A lot of derivatives of the original thinking. At the same time, I think a lot of additional really good thinking from Toyota themselves. They see it as it's not a static system, but although the principles, Keith, are exactly the same today as when I first learned them. I've had the good fortune of having folks from Toyota Supplier Support Center come into my plant, help me learn true TPS. That's how they put it at the time. They did had nothing. They nothing want nothing to do with lean. They're true TPS, and it was they dragged me through a keyhole. But their material was taken right from Taiichi Ohno's book and the philosophy. And if you were to look today at what Toyota is doing, it's radically different in terms of use of automation and tools and so forth, and just dealing with the same kinds of generational things that everybody else is dealing with. But the philosophy is exactly the same. The I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what are some of those principles or building blocks about that philosophy that haven't changed?
So there's four principles that I learned. Now there's principle is a funny word. There's Toyota referred to them as their philosophy. So I probably ought to be clear about this. The Shingo Institute refers to 10 fundamental principles, and they align very well with Toyota's philosophy. But the philosophy was pretty simple. It had 4 points to it. First one had to do with the customer. They said that the customer needs are number one. And what that meant was all of our viewpoints should be from the customer's standpoint. Take off your supplier hat and think of yourself as a customer for a moment. What you would like is exactly what you want. My exact order immediately with perfect quality. Well, that's pretty steep, but that's it. That's the ideal, whether you can do it or not. The exact order immediately with perfect quality. And that was philosophy point number one. And the second point was that people are the most valuable resource. I translated that for parochially into employees are the most valuable resource because that was the group that I was, but it would also include, the community and suppliers and everybody who make this up. People are the most valuable resource, which of course is in opposition to traditional accounting that treats people as a variable expense. So, if you buy a machine, that's an asset, but a person's an expense. So it's just something to kind of remember that whatever you're doing, it needs to be focused on these two groups. On the one hand, the customers, on the other hand, the people who are providing the value to the customers. The next point in this philosophy, and this is where this next door are where Toast Kaizen came from. If you want to learn something, it might be a good idea if you actually go and see. Direct observation, they call it, which is pretty much the scientific method. You're not going to learn anything sitting in a boardroom or having a discussion. You actually have to go to the spot where the work is done. And by the way, while you're there, talk to the people who actually do the work. They might know something. That's another issue because, we have this kind of pecking order in businesses, and I had descended into that spot where everybody's IQ is lower. So what would they know? That's a problem. That's a social problem. And then the last part of this was just this idea of little changes every day. Okay. The slogan for my organization is everybody, every day. Okay. But what that means, that mindset is everybody in the organization is a problem solver. Everybody comes to work every day, not just to do their work, but to fix their work if it's broken or maybe to improve it. And so Toast Kaizen was focused on direct observation and Kaizen. Small changes for the better. So those are the 4 points of the philosophy. Customer number one, employees, people most valuable resource, direct observation necessary to make improvement, and improvement is for everybody.
I'm curious, you strike me as someone who has some perhaps strong opinions in certain areas. I'm curious if you have some opinions over maybe misuses of lean or where people have misapplied it or, kind of taken it off of its path.
I don't think we have enough time.
Are there some warning signs perhaps that somebody could look out for and say, if you're starting to see this, watch out?
Yeah, I mean, it's this whole business of respecting people is a big challenge, and that's something one of the things Mr. Shingo made a point of a long time ago, and he was accusing American business in particular, but I think it's probably generally true. Uh, is that we are seeing our employees as he referred to as Theory X. And in other words, we just assume they're a problem. They're lazy, they're selfish. And I used to joke in my plant that employees are children and production employees are bad children. So that's number one. Number one, that's a problem because you're not even going to be listening to them. And that's the bulk of your workforce. And even if the problem is not caused down there on the floor, they're all going to appear there. So if you don't get them involved, you have a real problem. So there's that whole culture thing, respect for people, that I think is really, it's there's really two sides of the same coin. There's the technical part of knowing how to make improvement, but then there's the respect part. The people are most valuable resource. If you don't have both of those, what you end up with is a mezzanine squad of people with belts that are well-meaning but are overwhelmed, and it's not effective, not impactful. And I see a lot of that, and it doesn't mean that no improvement happens. It means that much more improvement could happen. So many businesses plateau way too soon, and they're satisfied. But Mr. Shingo would say, you got too many X employees. You want Y employees. Means bring it on, bring it on. And that was very fundamental in his thinking. The guy was often, thought of as a technical genius, but you read his books, it was all about people. And so I think he really nailed that piece.
I think that's such an interesting piece to this discipline in general is the opportunity to be engaged in the work. I have a philosophy that I don't think anybody starts a new job wanting, we're all optimistic. You start a new job, you generally think, hey, this is going to go great. This is going to be wonderful. Oh, this boss I have, this thing I'm doing is going to be great. And then over time, people tend to, that changes for whatever reason. But I think that this lean thing, this continuous improvement thing has a lot to offer people who want to not grow to hate the work that they do. Like there's an opportunity to grow and evolve in so many ways. How should somebody think about their business strategy, how should they think about lean as far as something they need to implement inside their business? Is it a set of processes? Is it a strategy? Is it a core value? Like, how would you describe it as something to plug into?
Well, on a practical level, any change begins with a perceived need. You got to have an issue, got to have something. If you're happy where things are, and it's incredible to me how happy people can be in bad situations, then you're not going to be inclined to change. So there needs to be, I think, certainly for those folks who are trying to create change, they have to find that emotional attachment. What is it that what's something really makes me mad? I'd like to fix that. Let's fix those problems, get people motivated. And then, so there's the motivation. And the motivation could be on several levels. And the motivation for the person on the floor who is pushing a cart with a broken wheel and has been doing it for 4 years and cursing under his breath the whole time. His motivation is based upon that freaking wheel. If we just fixed that wheel, I'd be happier. Would anybody be listening to me? And there's the motivation of the manager. Managers are just overwrought. It seems like they got to solve every problem in the business, and it's very hard for them to put time on this. And they're afraid to let go and turn this over to the folks who work for them. Why? Because they're working for people who hold them responsible for everything that goes on. So they're extra careful. I was talking to an organization this week, and it was exactly that. They were saying, oh, we just have meetings all the time. And it really boiled down to, well, nobody can do anything unless they ask you. You're just a bottleneck. So there's a certain amount, of courage involved, actually a lot in some organizations, to make that change from someone who is supposed to be the thinker, the only person who can think, to kind of making everybody a thinker-doer, getting more people involved. That's and then that's the motivation. And then there's, what Mr. Shingo referred to as better means. It's that stuff that you often see in the Toyota house with the just in time and Jidoka, and all of those things are, I'm saying they're technical, but they're not technical in the way, like designing some sort of high-tech product, but they're techniques, and they work. And they work for a reason, because they make it easy. They make it easy to make what's needed. So if people don't, they can be motivated, but if they don't have those skills, they're not going to do it. Like oftentimes, people just get beat up if a mistake is made. But once they learn that there's actually a way to trap the mistake, all of a sudden, everybody's talking about the mistakes, because I know I can fix this now. They're not going to fix it unless I talk about it. And so it's different. You got to have the motivation, and then you got to have the means to do it. And then along the way, as I said, there needs to be courage, and that courage is pretty much, there's got to be somebody at some level. It's not always the person's at the top. but it's got to be somebody who has sufficient, can provide sufficient cover to actually get this engine going.
I know organizations exist at all different points of evolution here, and you can have somebody who's a brand new employee inside of an organization who happens to land inside of a company that maybe has some sort of a formal program, or maybe they just happen to be very, a real go-getter and leaning into it. Or you can have a CEO at the top of a company says, this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to have this program here. Maybe in terms of like your journey or advice that you could give to somebody who is on their journey, if their company doesn't have like a super formal program in place that they can just march through, what are some ways that somebody might pull this in or get interested in this discipline inside their organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's going to be different for every organization because there's so many different sizes and shapes of organizations. But I think you kind of have to um, kind of stand on the balcony and look over at what your situation is and figure out, what can I get away with. But generally speaking, and this is something I learned when TSSE worked with my company, pick something which is very narrowly defined. They call it inch wide and mile deep. By mile deep, they meant get everybody involved from the top manager, if you can get him or her, to the middle managers and supervisors and the folks who are the engineers and the people who are actually, so you this little microcosm of your business, and create a proof of concept and develop capability with that group. Pick a project where you're not betting the business and where you can latch on to, let's say, the early adopters, and they really exist. I mean, the trick is to find them and get them engaged. Because now there's a success and you have something to show. As you noted, people don't come to work wanting to do a bad job or wanting to live in pain. And if they're seeing this is actually working, and this was my experience when I was manufacturing management, that initially people just assumed that anything we did was going to make things worse. That was the whole point of Toast Kaizen, to show uh, not just our employees, but our management team that, there's simple things that you can do and they're not going to make life harder for you. They're going to make it easier. And that's what we're aiming for. And you got to make that point and trying to do it across, like sometimes you get an organization of, let's say, reasonably large organization, and the decree comes down, it's going to be fest for everyone. Well, I mean, yeah, place organization is a great place to start. Not always, but it's a good place because it creates some stability. But trying to do something like that across a large group of people just don't have the resources. You start getting pushback, and you don't have and there are problems, and as with any change, and you can't really keep up with it. You end up taking the few people who are early leaders, and you kill them. It's just like they work themselves to death trying to make this work. Better to just sort of pick a narrow effort, make it work, and then expand from that.
When you say inch wide, mile deep, or pick a single effort or initiative, can you give us like an example of what you're thinking? Maybe something from your history or something,
Sure,
an example.
sure. I write this blog, and I've written about all of this at one point. Although recently I had to take the blog down, I'm repurposing some of the stuff, but it's coming back up. But so here's an example. When Toyota was working with us, we have a machine shop which feeds an assembly area, and we had tried to do some work. We were already a Shingo Prize recipient at this point, so people thought we were pretty good. I was not under that illusion personally. We had a lot to do, a lot of room to improve, but it was taking us 90 minutes to set up a machine. And that meant that this lathe had to produce, 100 times more parts than we needed, which meant, of course, we needed more lathes and more operators. And these poor folks at those machines were always behind. They were the bums because they could never get the parts to the factory on time. So we asked Toyota, could you help us with this? They sent in a consultant, actually a young lady who was an industrial engineer. I'm going to guess she was maybe 20 something, and she stood in the machine shop first on her first visit, and for a full day, none of the operators spoke to her at all. They didn't want to have anything to do with her. She came back on the second day, and she kept trying to ask questions. And finally, on that day, There was one thing on the sheet at the end of the day. She says, "The operators say that the machines have not been properly serviced and they're not reliable." And, if the machines are not reliable, you can't set them up reliably. And I guess wasn't really aware of that. I saw them. They seemed to be working, but making a lot of adjustments. She said, "So we're just gonna work on this one machine. This is the inch wide part. Just this one lathe over here. Not all the other dozen lathes, leave them alone. And I'm coming back in 3 weeks, and you need to overhaul that." And I regrettably said, "I don't think it's possible for us to get that machine overhauled in that period of time." And she said, "Well, good luck. I'm not coming back." So that was a real lesson for me. So I said, "Okay, well, we're gonna do it." And we did. And the next time she came back, there were 8 pages, Keith, of things that the operators wanted to do. And of course, those all had to be done in the same period of time. So
Wow.
when I mentioned earlier being dragged through a keyhole, that's what I'm talking about. But it was so illuminating to me. I'm saying all this stuff, they would say, "Bruce, you obviously don't respect these people because you leave all this stuff." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." They said, "Well, direct observation. See, here's the philosophy in practice. You actually go out there and you look. And of course, a lot of it you can't see unless the operators tell you. A lot of it just gets fixed by sleight of hand." So there's an example of kind of principles put into action, inch wide, mile deep. Now, if I could I know we're probably running close on time, but an extension of this is the director from TSSC came in. We were really humming. We were making great progress. So we went from 90 minutes down to an hour, down to 45 minutes. And when her boss, Mr. Oba from TSSC came in, I was really enthusiastic. And Oba, we walked to the spot where the improvements were being done. I said, "Oh, Mr. Oba," I said, "the BNC is already at 20 minutes. We're already at 20 minutes." And I said, "And we've already started on the LE22." And he looked at me. The LE22 was the machine next to it. He looked at me. He turned on his heels and walked out of the building. And I'm immediately saying, "Oh my God, what did I do?" So I followed him out and I asked him, I said, "I'm Mr. Oba." I said, "I thought we were doing the right thing." And he sort of like in a, Mr. Miyagi type of thing, just sighed and said, "You'll never be better than," because he had given us a goal of single minute exchange of dies. And all of a sudden I was going to spread the learning from 20 minutes. Once again, inch wide, mile deep. And of course, at that point, I was the VP of manufacturing. So that was the mile deep part. And it was a total change because now something was happening and the operators felt somebody's listening. We're doing things. It was incredibly creative. All the little changes, we started out talking about, hours of setup, then went to minutes of setup. And by the time we were done, we had a chart on the wall that showed, minutes and seconds of setup, and little things you could do here or there. Really fascinating. For me, that was an example. There were so many of those examples. Once people get involved, that's where the everybody every day part came from. That was for me. I said, "Yeah, this is what this is about."
That's a great mantra. Everybody, every day. It sounds like you've had some really interesting experiences with mentors through this process. If there's a few of those lessons that have been maybe passed down to you, I'm sure there's a lot, but is there maybe a few that stand out to you as stuff that was passed down to you that you have figured out how to pass on to others?
So, yeah, there's certainly I've had a lot of mentors, and it's hard to say exactly. I've just sort of given you one, the inch wide, mile deep. Masaki Amai was another person who had a great influence on me. Brilliant guy. His idea of Kaizen was, many small changes for the better that come from the common sense and experience of the people who do the work. And that's a direct quote. Now, at the time we were trying to implement this, there was sort of competing ideas of Kaizen, and there still are. Big boom, break them up, bash it down, mow everything down, stuff. There are times when you can make major changes. Not the first thing you do. What we're trying to do, the spirit of it is that people have this tremendous ability to create change, but only if you get them involved. So that was an important choice for me to not get sucked into the idea that if you don't have one big Kaizen event a month, you're not doing anything. But it was actually, I want to be careful because there are times, I think, particularly when a company has got a number of people on board, what you end up with is more and more people involved, less and less resistance. So things that seemed impossible to do on day one, say, oh, that's going to take us forever. They get done on a Friday afternoon now because you would say it took us 30 years to get to the point where we believe we could do it, and it took us a half an hour or half a day to actually do it. So that's a big part of this change management. We're all so accustomed to the way we've always done things, and we're afraid of change because it seems in the past, whenever there was a change, it just made things worse.
That does happen from time to time, doesn't it? That thing that
Well,
we
when
think's
we talk
gonna.
about you mentioned cost reduction, people scatter and you wonder why. Now, this isn't just in manufacturing. Cost reduction is chopping heads in a lot of businesses. In healthcare, it's awful. So when you say, oh, we've got somebody who's coming in to do continuous improvement, immediately they scatter again because, let's don't keep a low profile or you might not have a job.
It does
And
seem like there's a bit of a, I don't necessarily want to call it a branding problem, but when you use the word lean, I do think that there is a certain group of people that think a private equity firm is going to come in and cut some headcount or something. And I think it's obviously not the theory, the philosophy, the best practice. So
that's because they do. This is not imaginary. This is what actually happened.
there's of course a big difference between the mindset, the thinking everybody every day, and then the behavior, just getting into the very specific behaviors. I know that it's not as simple as just behaviors, but are there some behaviors that you would look for in an organization to say, these are behaviors that show me or show the organization that they're doing the things they need to do to think this way? Are there some behavior patterns that you would look for in an organization?
Well, yeah, but I would start, oftentimes when we talk about behaviors, we start thinking about, you know, behaviors of the folks on the shop floor. I start with the behaviors of the management. And, someone talk about employee engagement, but management engagement is a big problem. It's pretty common that they only have the faintest idea of what's happening and that things are being done almost undercover for fear of, somebody finding out. And I'm being a little unfair here because there clearly are some top managers who do a wonderful job of leading. And it's remarkably different when a top manager is really getting into this. It's so different. Things can happen so much more quickly. But in the absence of that, it's tenuous. And managers also, there's certain behaviors that they have. There are these just moments of truth where somebody comes up and wants to talk about a problem that they have, and they're told to get back to work. I mean, that has a very profound impact. It says, if she doesn't care, then neither do I. And you wonder where the spite comes from. I don't wonder. I don't wonder. I think that, 99.999% of people, as you say, come to work, try to do a good job, and they have ideas. And after that all is beat out of them for a while, they say, well, that's the way it is. I'm just trying to survive. This is what drew me. But, initially I was drawn to this because I had it, with the business that I was working for was in a miserable state. We needed to fix things. But ultimately, pretty quickly, I was drawn to it because it was so exciting to see how brilliant people were. These weren't people, they weren't brilliant because they had doctoral degrees. A lot of these folks, in my plant, there were 9 languages spoken. And these persons many of them did not finish high school, but they were brilliant. All of a sudden, because they saw the ability to create change and they had the means to create change, amazing things happen. And that's why I stay with it today. Even though, probably baseball batting averages are higher than the success rate that I have personally with companies. If you could get 20% of the companies that you work with to really soar, see, that's energizing.
Two things that I want to come back to right there. One of them, let me ask you, let's say I'm a manager, maybe I'm kind of newish in my role and I'm listening to you and I'm learning about this lean. I'm hearing you talk about employee engagement and I'm like, Bruce, I think I've kind of messed up because I've been like the answer guy. Like my people have been bringing me problems and I've just been solving them. And now I'm feeling a little stressed out and overwhelmed. And they brought me some ideas and I've kind of slapped their hand. And now I think they're kind of afraid to. How can I back up from that? How can I move from that to, a better form of leadership with my people?
It takes time, but people are resilient. People want things to be better. Look, I've made more than a few goofs like that, but people will forgive you. You admit I made a mistake. I was wrong. That alone, I mean, that's not a typical management behavior.
That's true.
People, by and large, people want things to be better, and they will keep trying if they think there's an opportunity. It's so funny. Like, I've been in kind of doing this consulting since 1999. And that's my second career after 28 years in manufacturing. And in all that time, um, second, third, fourth attempts were ones that were successful. It's in fact, it's unusual if an organization will approach this challenge and be successful first time. They may learn a few things stick. Conditions change. If business gets really good, sometimes this just gets forgotten and it wanes and then it needs to be picked up again. Keeping it continuous is definitely a challenge. And it's not something, at least in my opinion, it's not something that ever, my former boss, who was the owner of the company, asked me one time, says, "Bruce, haven't we had enough continuous improvement?" And I said, "Oh." I said, "No." I said, "That's not how it works." You're continually shoveling sand against the tide. You just need a whole lot of shovels, and you gotta constantly be on this. And this is why I think so many organizations struggle. One thing that many companies do not give much attention to is succession. That's a problem. So a new person takes over, and it could be in a variety of different spots, and they don't understand, and they're not providing. They don't have that vision, and things can fall apart pretty quickly. Planning for succession is a big deal for l- companies, organizations, large and small.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. Nothing, particularly in a small business, nothing like seeing how much stuff was stuck in somebody's head when, somebody key leaves the organization and you're like, nobody knows how to do that thing anymore.
Yeah.
That's a problem that can come up from time to time. So let's talk just a minute about the future of change and continuous improvement. And AI is like the thing that everybody wants to talk about. And AI is changing so many things. It's going to create endless supplies of ideas and things that need to happen, perhaps. But there's still a lot of things that aren't going to change. I'm curious if you have any take on just AI and how that affects things like the lean and continuous improvement.
Yeah. So it has a big effect. Absolutely. Look, I'm sure at some point somebody was standing at the side of the road when the wheel was invented and saying, "Whoa, that's going to change everything." And they were right. And the same is true with AI. And it is mind-boggling. Not just AI, but robotics, and that the just technology in general is advancing at a rapid rate. And we need to be thinking about how to use it wisely, which I think, is maybe a general issue for the human species of being wisely using wise use of technology. And I'm actually working with a group. I'll just give them a plug. Future of People at Work. That's dealing, among other things, with where will AI fit? Because it's not going away, got it going away, and it's becoming more ever present and more powerful. I use AI on a regular basis for research because it's so much faster than digging through file after file. As yet, I have refused to let it write anything for me. But because it becomes a question of how it's used. It's part of the future. I know I have good friends at Toyota, and they see it as just another extension of technology. And what's the best way? How can we use it to help us solve problems faster and faster? The buzzword is it's AI plus people, not AI in place of people. And that's a concern to me because there's no question. And the interesting thing is that a lot of this is white collar jobs we're talking about. There are so many entry-level white-collar jobs that can be done by an assistant, an AI assistant, but do we really wanna do that? I mean, it's all based upon current knowledge. Who's gonna generate the new knowledge? It's definitely a part of continuous improvement going forward. It's a part of living going forward. Question is, will we have the wisdom to apply it? For this gets back to the principles again.
Yeah.
People are the most valuable resource.
So this gets back to one of the questions I wanted to pick up on from before. But for you, Bruce, what does a good day look like? Like if you could do anything at this point in your career and have a good day at work versus a bad day at work, have you thought much about like my ideal day is when X happens?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, generally, and I think all the folks that I work with, the consultants, would say the same thing. The ideal day is when you're working with the client and the light goes on. And we're struggling to learn, and all of a sudden, they discover this new way of operating, and they become excited. That's what that's what this is about. That's what keeps me going.
I love that. I love that answer. Do you think that that answer is something that has evolved in you, or has it always been there? I mean, I know some people like early in their career are like the doer and they're the ones, they want the light to go on for themselves, but it seems like later in the career, watching the light go on for others has more of a place.
I think that's probably true, Keith, but for me, it was a little different because I landed in an environment where I'd had no previous experience. I was not encumbered with the mistaken idea that I knew what I was doing. Now, imagine this 23-year-old kid, I guess I was 28 at that point, going into a factory knowing nothing about manufacturing. I was not in a position to be dictating. So all I could see was people were living in a world of pain. Things were not working. Orders were late. Profits were low. Morale was terrible. What can I do about it? And it was my good fortune that I happened on to a book by Shigeo Shingo. And that's kind of all grew from there.
I love that you start with, that you kind of point out the idea that it started with a book. One thing that I'm very fond of, I'm an advocate for people being engaged in their work, and being the CEO of a company. Sometimes that sounds like, hey, I want people to work all the time or whatever. That's not necessarily the case. I want people to really enjoy what they do at work. I also think that to really enjoy what you work, you have to probably put in a little bit of like effort into building your skills outside of the workplace. Like I'm guessing that the stuff that you've learned about lean, you didn't learn it all on company time. You probably had to invest some time outside of that to read some books and do some things
Sure, it's
and
it's like
improve yourself.
anything else. If you're doing something, that you really are excited about, that you put time into it, doesn't seem like work. I had the good fortune of discovering the Shingo Prize, and that gave me an opportunity to go out and visit companies. So I went out as an examiner. It's funny, whenever I would head out as an examiner, the folks in the plant would say, "Oh, geez, he's gonna come back with a million more ideas." And that was my opportunity. So I felt like, well, I'm participating, I'm into the community, but I'm out there to learn. So yeah, and I just want maybe take one step aside. I've been talking about Toyota Production System exclusively, but the fact is there's a whole lot of really good learning which is only tangentially related. I wrote a post for my blog this week. I think maybe you read it, and it quotes a guy named Alfie Kohn who wrote a book about essentially his book was written for teachers, for school teachers. But the idea just struck with me that the way we force people to learn, they're not really learning. It's not motivational. What we're looking for is intrinsic motivation. You were looking for this, bring it on. And that doesn't happen by saying, we'll give you a gold star if we'll two ideas and we'll give you a gold star. So that's not typically Toyota, although they absolutely would subscribe to that. And I'll mention also that one of the early influences on me was the Goal, Ellie Goldratt. Now that's not lean. He would say it's not lean, and lean people would say it's not lean. But the fact is, it had the same issues. The problem with queuing and bottlenecks and people. He talked a lot about people as well. So it's not one technology or another. I think if you kind of get the spirit of making things better, there are a lot of avenues, a lot of avenues as yet unexplored, different types of different parts of the business, in engineering or sales or finance. And you'll see them out there, but they're not in the mainstream. We're still kind of focused on the people who are on the shop.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really like about this discipline is how deep it is. I mean, there's a lot of tangents, I think is the word that you use, similar related things, evolution and just scientific thinking. I mean, yeah, so much there. And how applicable it can be across disciplines is is always interesting to me, and the fact that it's just infinitely applicable in different areas, and just because you know the principles doesn't mean that you can act perfectly in all of those situations. There's always something more, it seems. So that's a
Absolutely.
very good one. And that's part of our mission here, is just to inspire people to get interested in this. If take a look at some of the books, look at some of the content, get interested, go to YouTube, download some books, take advantage of programs that might exist inside your company. If you happen to be in a company that has like a formal yellow belt or green belt program or something, it's the it's a step on the journey. It's not the destination itself, to just get the,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
get the. I have one simple concept. So one of the simple concepts of lean is this idea of respect, and respect seems like such a simple concept, but sometimes I talk to people who feel like respect just basically means being nice to people. But I have a hunch that you might have a perspective on what really demonstrating respect means in this context.
Yeah, well, it means several things. Like when Mr. Shingo talked about respect, he talked about respect for humanity. And this was the context. He says, don't don't rag on people if they make a mistake, because that's just part of humanity. There is nobody who doesn't make mistakes. He said, and all you're doing is making the situation worse. So respect humanity. Let's figure out who we are, and that's what mistake proofing was about. Let's do something about it rather than beating people up, which unfortunately is still what often happens. And then there's deferential respect, which for me is important. There are people that I have learned from who I feel like, when I talked about Mr. Oba, he's somebody, and he was so brilliant that I could not bow low enough. He was just such a brilliant guy. And that's deferential respect. I'm not going to spend a lot of time arguing with him, because if he says something and I disagree, it's probably because I don't understand yet. Okay, so there's that. There's a really negative type of respect, and that's, respect your superiors. I think that's a problem. Respect your elders. I'm okay with that at this point in my life. The but the idea that for both of those are deferential respect, but not necessarily deserved. This idea of mutual respect, of understanding that I think Will Nye, the science guy, was quoted saying, "Everybody knows something you don't know."
So true.
That if you need to be curious and understand people. That we spend a lot of time with clients trying to focus on that. Listen to understand. Don't listen to answer back. Honestly, this is a problem for me, because I get rolling. I overpower people, and I just need to step back and say, Bruce, just stop already. Let people talk. Let them listen. Listen to what they're saying, and you might learn something. And that's respect for people. The fact that somebody doesn't have an advanced degree does not make them stupid. And the fact that somebody has an advanced degree does not make them smart. These are just, quirks of fate, to where you grew up and how much money your family had. But so people are brilliant. And just reminding yourself at every point that if you take time to value people, this goes back to that same principle again, that people are the most valuable resource. Don't squander it. Make sure that you're developing those people.
That's so true. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com. So Bruce, let's talk a little bit about the conference that you're putting together and you're involved with. How did that get started, and what has it turned into?
Well, thank you. This is actually our 21st year, and it's surprising how time flies. And we meet at a different location in New England. We call it the Northeast Lean Conference, and this year it's in New Hampshire, but sometimes it's in Massachusetts, and sometimes in Rhode Island, sometimes in Connecticut. It largely because we've tried to create a practitioners conference that people can drive to, so that it doesn't become a huge expense. It is an expense to be sure. And we attract an audience of people who are excited about improvement and want to share. Not a bunch of consultants. Not that I'm, the consultants have a value. I'd be cursing myself because that's what I am. But it's not just people like me, it's people who are living with the same kinds of challenges from a variety of different businesses, healthcare and government, military. We got some folks from naval base at this conference, and certainly manufacturing, and at many different parts of the organization. So we'll get a bunch of people from the shop floor, and they can come because it's local. Sometimes maybe that we'll have a 2-day conference, and one person from the floor will come on one day, another person will come on another day. And we get a lot of leadership as well. So it's the idea, it's the inch wide, mile deep. We're just focused on this particular thing. And we want everybody there. We try to have something for everyone. We have this wonderful award, which we refer to as the Silver Toaster Award. You probably guess where that came from. That wasn't my idea, but I like it. And it's awarded based upon nominations of persons who are not in a supervisory or management role, sort of persons who, in and of their own volition, have taken the leadership to improve. And we've got some incredible people. It's touching. And often this folks, I used to say when I was in the factory, nobody in the factory gets any appreciation. They don't even know we're here. So it's really valuable that way. So we've had recipients from healthcare and from service and from manufacturing. Of course, that'll be part of our conference this year. And recently we introduced the Lean Pioneer Award, which is for people who have spent a lifetime, and maybe they may not be world famous, but they're people who have dedicated their lives to continuous improvement, maybe getting to retirement. That's also a nice award. And we have, in addition to speaking, 4 sessions of speakers, we have what we call a community of lean lounge, where persons who, let's say, don't want to stand up on a podium and a microphone can stand next to a poster and talk about what they did and what they got. That's almost one of my favorite parts of this, because there's so much sharing that goes on. About 20 different companies will get there, and so they share amongst themselves. And we're also featuring the Future of People at Work conference this year. The teams are working on that. And lastly, a panel, I think a rather important panel, including Toyota and Miles Arnone from remanufacturing, and Bruce Watkins, one of our board members, talking about, well, let's talk about now. What's going on now? What's going on? What do we do in this crazy economy where not sure, there's uncertainty? How do we manage that? Where does TPS fit in? Where their company is going? So there are many things to draw people, and I hope that they'll be successful, because we're looking. We typically get around 400 people, and I'm hoping we'll get them up to Manchester on October 27 and 28. So there you go.
You
That's
bet.
my
You
sales
bet.
pitch.
So it sounds like it's a 2-day thing. You've got some conferences, you've got some networking opportunities. It's a lot of practitioners. I love the sharing of is it like projects, improvements that people have done? Is
That's
that
exactly what it is.
I think that's such an important part. We see that with KPI Fire, people use our tool to do some of that internally, particularly companies that have like lots of plants where they need to break the silos down and share things that are happening within the company. But I
Yeah.
think events like what you're putting together is a great opportunity for people in those companies, and also smaller ones where maybe it's just them that's doing this thing and they want to figure out how people in other industries are doing it, because there's so many lessons. And again, that's what's been fun about this podcast that we've been doing, is hearing the lessons, whether you're in a flight school like Will Miller or Theory of Constraints, or the stuff that you're doing, biomedical, manufacturing, defense, like so many different industries. Like the problem solving practices, the tools, the skills, the mindset are so similar. And I think that one thing I'm struck by with the future of people at work, or the future of AI, is how important this idea of employee engagement is in this discipline. And I think that for any company out there that's trying to figure out how to have a competitive advantage in the future, having a workplace where people really like the work that they're doing and they're involved in making positive change is such a good strategic advantage that I see. So I really appreciate what you're doing with the conference and building that community.
Well, thank you. And I certainly agree with you. It's an underappreciated employee benefit that I like my job. Some people listen to me. We're actually making things better. So, yeah, very important.
That's one thing that I've thought a lot about as I think about AI and how AI is going to change the work that people do. And again, with all of these AI models out there, infinitely being able to create every idea and tell you exactly what you should do to reduce scrap, I still think that the constraint, the bottleneck in that situation is employees who care enough to actually want to do it. And I think that the future is bright for people who get involved with continuous improvement and read the book, watch the YouTube videos on making toast with Bruce, and have a proactive mindset about how change is going to happen. Because one thing that's never going to stop changing is the change itself, right?
Definitely is not, Keith. You may recall the days before the GPS, and you might be looking with a map in your hand or MapQuest or something like that before it was on your phone. And so it's wonderful. It's a wonderful tool. AI is a lot like that too. It's just this type of breakthrough where it just tells you where to go. Uh, that being said, if I actually know how to get there, I generally will pick a better route than GPS. It's the same with AI. Am, I will say, kind of a Shingo geek. I have read everything that is readable in English multiple times. And when I inquire of from AI specifics around that, there are mistakes. And ChatGPT, I guess they call it hallucinating.
Yeah.
It makes up quotes, and I'll ask, "Is that a direct quote?" Nope, not a direct quote. So that's the status. But do I think that's going to stay that way? No, it's just going to get better and better. Right now, we're just at the very beginning of its capability, but got to be a little careful.
Yeah, I think we had a guest on recently who used the phrase that continuous improvement, this discipline, is really entering a golden age, because I think the people that know how to do structured problem solving, I mean, like the quick wins, of course, are wonderful and you start there, but to do larger structured problem solvings, the big organizations that are trying to adopt AI, like there's this, I mean, where we're at currently in the middle of 2025, who knows when you might be watching this episode, things could be totally different in 18 months. I could look silly with my predictions, but it still relies on a measured approach to change, because you talk a lot about employee empowerment. That doesn't mean that everybody just goes and does whatever they want, right? You need to have a structured approach to solving these problems, and that's just going to explode the need for how to do that with it. That's good. Well, Bruce, I'd like to just move into a little section we call the rapid fire. These are just a few quick questions, kind of short phrase answers. The most important job of a leader is to blank.
Inspire.
Inspire. I love that one. Do you have a favorite go-to tool from your lean toolbox for solving problems that you like to refer to?
Well, I think the tool has to be based on the problem, but one of my favorites has always been Poka Yoke because it changes people from being stupid and being criticized to being smart and creative. In other words, they can now solve that problem. So it engages people because it removes the stigma of making a mistake. So I love that as a problem solving method.
That's a great one. Could you explain the poka-yoke concept to anybody that might not be familiar with that term?
Yeah, so Mr. Shingo made the comment that mistakes are inevitable, but the defects that they create are not. For example, the local bank that I went to used to, if I took my cash and drove away, they would keep the card, and then I'd be stuck.
Electric card machine.
So, if you just look at the sequence of things, I think I got that backwards. If I took the cash, if I took my card, no, I got it right. In other words, the sequence in which you do these things, I can make them as people like me, absent-minded people, will make those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm in a hurry and I drive away. I grab the cash, and then later on, the card eats the machine. I got to go into the bank and ask for it. But so they reverse the process. No, you can't get your cash until you take your card, and then we give you your cash. Chances of me driving away without that cash are very small,
Lower.
Keith.
Yeah, much
So
lower.
that's Poka-yoke, and there are instances of that everywhere in our personal lives, in our work lives, and you can design those problems away. Anytime you see a sign that says be careful, and there are a lot of them, it's because a process has been designed so people can make a mistake. And what that means is that even when they're not making the mistake, they're worrying about making the mistake. Oh, did I get that? Did I get that? I forgot. Did I count that right? And so there are innumerable opportunities to present the defect, the mistake from turning into a defect. Just trap it. I love it. I love that.
That's a great one. Here's another finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is blank.
Everybody, every day.
Every day. That's a great one. Do you have a favorite question that you like to lean on?
Now, what problem are you trying to solve? I guess that's a good one.
That's such a good one. I love that one. And what are you most fired up or excited about right now? What are you looking forward to?
Conference. Yeah, that's exciting. I think it's a great opportunity to get together with people. I meet people I have known for a long time, and I meet new people. It's exciting for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Bruce, we'll wrap it up with that. And I really appreciate you making the time to come on with us today. This has been super fun to have a conversation with you and to hear some of these stories. It's definitely fun. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure, Keith. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. For anybody that wants to connect with you, is there a website or something that you want to share with everyone?
Sure. gbmp.org.
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 And check out the conference in late October. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We appreciate your time and your experience. For anybody listening, if you would like to suggest a guest or ask a question or give us any ideas for future episodes, please reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Keith Norris. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on the social channels, share the podcast with your friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.